coming out to see Comicpalooza podcast here with our special guest, sir. Please introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, my name's Jock. Thanks for coming out in your brave the evacuation notes that we all just had.
Also joined by my heraldry, Mr.
Russ, how you guys doing?
I'm
a lot louder.
We are Comicpalooza podcast, and thank you guys for joining us. At the end of this panel, we'll be handing away a couple of pair of George Clinton tickets, probably Funkadelic. But sir, thank you so much for coming down here. Please give an introduction to yourself and what you do, and yeah, this is your audience.
Hey everyone, my name's Jock. I draw comics and make film posters and do concept work for movies. I've just finished writing and drawing my own Batman project for DC called Batman One Dark Knight. Yeah.
Nice. Now, here at Comicpalooza, I've been scouring the Comicpalooza, for some of your artwork, and man, let me tell you, you do have some artwork out there, and it is very, very, very lucrative, also very rare. I want to congratulate you, sir, because I was trying to find something of yours so I can present to you, and you can probably give it to one of the audience members, but it's very hard to find some of your stuff. But it's good though, it's very rare, and when you find it, hold on to it, don't let it go. And we're Russell.
Well, yeah, let's kick it off with some type of fun questions. What got you into comics originally?
So I've always loved to draw, and then when I was about 12 or 13, I saw a comic called 2000 AD, which is a British anthology comic. Character Judge Dredd, I don't know if you guys have heard of Judge Dredd.
Only a little bit.
Yeah, but
Judge Joseph Dredd.
That's it. Well, it's actually Joe, I'm afraid. That's another thing that's Sylvester Stallone movie didn't get quite right. Anyway, sorry. I digress. And when I picked up 2000 AD, even though I love to draw, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to draw comics.
Well, how did that even come about? Getting on 2000 AD?
Oh, they were for sale on local news agents each week. You go in, there'd be a new issue filled with comic greats, Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons, Steve Dillon, Kevin O'Neill, just amazing talent who was in it back then, and so many names went on to be big in the comics industry. That was it. And then I tried going to art college, and I was rejected from art college. They didn't let me in. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give this comics thing a go.
So artists typically try to put their spin on characters and stuff. What is kind of your style? How do you bring your own personality into the characters?
I don't know, but the comics they're an amazing medium for letting you have your own voice. Actually, so, joking aside, and all I've ever tried to do is try and do my own thing, and luckily it seems to have worked.
So
far, so good. Touch wood. A lot of artists and writers look to other comics, for inspiration, and I certainly did that. But I think you can have more success if you've got a unique voice and a unique idea about how you're approaching the material, and I've been very lucky that all through my career I've been able to do that.
Is there anything that draws you to certain characters that you want to do, or do the offers just kind of come your way and just roll with it? How do you get on some projects?
A bit of both, really. There's some stuff I'm more suited to, I find Superman incredibly hard to draw, for example, but I find Batman incredibly easy to draw because there's a lot of black, and I love using black. But kind of project-wise, I'm lucky I'm friends with great writers and editors, and I've got to the point now where I can kind of curate what I'm working on, which is very lucky.
Gotcha.
In the world of digital, do you prefer digital drawing, or do you do old school drawing? What do you prefer? Watercolors. I know you've done some watercolor illustrations that I've seen. It's very beautiful. But what do you prefer personally?
I'm still traditional. I still use pens and things to draw comic books, and then I scan in the black and white art and colour it in Photoshop. But for film work, that's all digital because that's more painted and it's more easily editable as well.
Do you feel like there's a dying art form out there that's becoming because everyone's going to digital?
No, digital's just a different tool. You still have to have the same skills, the same. You get good digital artists and bad digital artists. It's just like, I kind of think that at some point back in the day, someone would have shown someone a pen and they would have gone, Ethan, what is this? Contraption. They're just tools, and it's what the person using does.
Your illustrations are definitely very unique, very interesting, very awesome. Who would be some of your inspirations growing up and coming up, and who would who inspired you to do what you do?
Yeah, well, loads of guys from 2008 when I was younger. Brian Bolland, McMahon's, Ron Smith, Steve Dillon, and then as I got a bit older, I loved some of the painted stuff that was going on. Bill Sienkiewicz, I still love, Kent Williams, Dave McKean. In the late 80s, where they kind of, to me at the time, because I was trying to get into art college, to me that was sort of elevating the art form a little bit. They were doing fully painted stuff that was all new and fresh, and it seemed really rich and exciting at the time. Mike Mignola's amazing. I mean, yeah, you just take from everyone, really.
Nice. Awesome.
When you get a new project, how do you like already have a vision of like the direction that you want to go based on like the story that you have, or how do you develop like the tone of your drawings?
Well, yeah, I mean it's a good question. You can how to answer that. I mean, really, you just draw the way you draw, really. But you can make choices in like the color. I color a lot of my own stuff. You can make choices in the color which affect tone.
Does it take like multiple drafts at times?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it normally takes a while to find it. So you find like even if you go into starting a comic new, thinking, oh, I'm going to do a bit like this, it sort of settles down after about 20 pages, and it almost finds itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You can't force things too much, you can't push it too much. You just got to let it be, and that tends to be where the best storytelling, the best kind of the stuff people respond to tends to be that more natural feeling stuff. In my experience, so I try not to think about it too much. Try to use my instinct and just go with it.
Is it like the same process for the movie posters versus comics and cartoons? Does it change kind of depending on the medium?
Yeah, no, it's definitely different. It's like a different, it's like flexing a different muscle. Like with comics are a grind. There's always another page to draw. There's always another panel. There's always another thing. There's a deadline approaching. There's another issue to do. There's and that in itself can make you create things that you wouldn't do if you had more time to do it. Sometimes, because you're in that kind of daily grind of doing it, and you can surprise yourself. Things can happen so naturally. Whereas like movie posters, I can spend like months just tweaking.
How early do they normally hit you up for movie posters?
It varies.
Okay.
It completely varies. I've been asked to do one in 2 days, and some of the stuff from Mondo, I've had no deadline at all. I've had to sort of bring it up on the computer and had it for like 3 or 4 months, just kind of tweaking it, moving the type around, and just perfecting it, which is a really nice change of pace to the comics. And similarly with the film work, that's also it's much calmer. It's more you can be a little bit more thoughtful and a little more kind of intricate with what you're presenting. Yeah, and comics have that, but they also I believe should have like a rhythm to them. Then the storytelling is good. Comics aren't single illustrations. Your job is to tell an overall story, and like any good film, it has to have good rhythm, good pace, good feeling. So it's a different thing.
Do you take that? I don't know if it's a saying or what, but I've heard like it's better to show than to tell.
Sure.
So how do you like map out your panels and like get the story to actually flow in a way that it makes sense, even if you don't read it?
I love storytelling. That's actually my favourite aspect of it. When I don't do comics for a while, that's what I miss the most, because I lay out each page about this big, tiny little thumbnails. Almost. My sort of goal is to do them almost as quickly as someone might read the page.
Right.
Because then you sort of get a sense of the beats and kind of how you're reading the script and quite quickly, and it's kind of. Then you get the ebbs and the flows, and you try like laying out pages and stuff like that. That's my favourite bit, really. And the truth is, once I've done the layout, part of me goes, well, I've done it now, but I've still got to draw the damn thing. It's like, because to me that's the pure, where I'm literally telling a story right there and then. And then after that, I have to render it, and I have to do it, make it. That's definitely one of my favourite aspects is creating that flow. Yeah, and just clear, concise storytelling with the art. So then actually the dialogue, the dialogue should then just enhance what's already there. But the dialogue shouldn't have to explain what a reader's looking at. It should only ever kind of lift it.
Do you do any lettering as well?
So with my last Batman project, One Dark Night, I've written, drawn, and coloured, and I was going to letter it as well because my friend Cliff Chang has done a Catwoman book called Lonely City, and it's both a decent that label, both the same formats. We were talking about working on basically similar projects. And then he was lettering it, and I said, "Well, how are you actually lettering it?" And he told me what he was doing. I was like, "Oh man, I bet I could do that." So the way I wrote it was actually putting on rough letters onto my artwork to see how the page balanced and how much dialogue I felt it was sitting right.
So you started with like the lettering first? Or?
No. Those layers that's told you about.
Oh, gotcha.
Then do the art, and then dialogue on top.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but for a while I was thinking I'm going to letter it as well, but I just ran out of time. And we got Glenn Robbins who's lettered many of my comics over the years, and he's done a much better job than I could have done.
Nice. Earlier you mentioned some Sylvester Stallone Judge Dredd jokes. I mean, how do you compare? And you have illustrated some Judge Dredd, some beautiful Judge Dredd art. How do you differentiate? Well, not differentiate. What's the word I'm looking for? How do you feel about the old movie from Sylvester Stallone to the new one with Keith Urban? Carl Urban. Do you think they got it right, or they still haven't gotten it right, Judge Dredd style?
Well, I'm slightly biased because I was the concept artist on the new one.
Okay.
I worked on it. So, I mean, there's the old movie. There's not a movie, maybe apart from Phantom Menace, that I've gone into theatre wanting to enjoy more than that Judge Dredd movie. I couldn't believe they're making a film of it. And then Fergie, that weird comedic sidekick, shows up, and it's just like, oh no. And so to me, they made some missteps. And I feel like with the newer version, even though I was involved with it, trying to take myself out of it, and Alex Garland, who was the writer and had a massive creative influence on it, had a really far more solid idea of what the character was about. It was brutal, it was hard. They had to do an awful lot with a very small budget for a sci-fi film, but I think it's a great movie.
Nice. And also, like, how do you feel about I mean, we're living in a world where comics are coming into movies. Like, how do you feel about the adaptation from comics to movies and what Marvel is doing and what DC is trying to do? How do you feel about that?
Oh, throwing a bit of shade there.
Well, I mean, let's be real. I mean, Marvel is the Disney of the Marvel universe. They've taken it deep parts and everything, and DC is still trying to catch up.
So the first comic I did for DC, but The Losers, was made into a movie. So I've had direct experience of that as well. That was in like 2010. And talk about Marvel movies, the cast was insane. It was Chris Evans, Zoe Saldana, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Idris Elba. The cast was ridiculous. If you made that movie now, it would be like A-list. And that happened just after Sin City had come out, Frank Miller's Sin City, where they stuck very close to the source material. So, and to me, that kind of told Hollywood that you can do that you don't have to change. You don't have to change too much to adapt into a feature film. You should sort of stick to the source material where you can. So, like in the comic, the character Jensen had these little kind of John Lennon glasses, and I thought they might put them on. But I also gave him these like sideburns, this little goatee, just out of whimsy, so that he looked kind of unique in the comic. And we go to the set in Puerto Rico and chatting to Zoe Saldana, and she says, "Hey Jensen," like she even calls him by the character's name. And my character that I'd only ever drawn, and existed in my head, walks up towards me. It was Chris Evans as well. I just throw that in. Walked up towards me and goes, "Hey," and shook my hand, and he had the same hair, like the same goatees, the same, and his little glasses, and it was the most surreal moment.
Yeah, that must be really like, I drew you and now you're standing before me, and
he walked towards me and shook my hand. It was really weird. So anyway, go back to your original question. Like, I think I think some of the success in the Marvel movies is that they've not been shy about not sticking to necessarily the comics, but taking what's good and what people love about the comics and leaning into it, and not thinking it needs to be sort of this, or it needs to be more serious, or it needs to be darker, or whatever it might be. They've done an amazing job, I think of just leaning into what makes these characters amazing, what people love about them.
Do you like manga or anime, or do you?
Yeah. I don't particularly follow it, but
right.
Yeah.
Would you ever illustrate some manga?
No, that's not my wheelhouse at all. They do stuff I could never do. Yeah.
I just because like manga and anime is is taking off and been taking off here in America, and now more and more people, I think anime and manga sales are outselling American comics. And so,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my daughter's super into them. She loves drawing as well, and that's the sort of style that she loves to do. Yeah.
So, you've been in the industry for a little while. Obviously, like one of the big changes that's happened over time is switch over to like digital. Is there another noticeable change to you as an insider that you don't think like other people really notice? Like what would be a big change within the industry?
No, I'm just really happy that it's still thriving and growing, and new people are coming up doing amazing stuff. You know, when I started coming over to America in like 2003, so nearly 20 years ago. Wow. And it was definitely smaller then, even though it was San Diego Comic Con. It was huge. You know, it was just in the convention center, and then I came back like 5 years later, and it spilled out into the streets, and there's banners everywhere, and it feels much more like a sort of festival where you have families, and you know, that's been a really nice thing for me to see, that it's just continuing to grow and thrive.
Has digital expedited the process at all? The whole creative process?
I mean, I think the newer generations will have tablets and stuff, you know, that I didn't have, and that's probably the medium that they might kind of, you know,
Gravitate towards it.
yeah, and have access to incredible programs that they can use, you know, Procreate and everything to draw, to make beautiful pieces. You know, and I just think that's great.
Kind of a side, okay, that kind of answers the question, but do you think with some of these digital tools, is it like, hey, that's an easier way than I had? You kids had it too?
No, I don't agree with that at all. It's just evolution. The better humans have access to this stuff, the better the stuff's going to be.
Back in my day.
I think that's brilliant. I think it's, you know, there's amazing young artists coming up, and I absolutely love it.
Beautiful.
Are there any future projects you're working on, whether it be other illustrations or your own illustrations, or any characters you're working on?
So I've just finished Batman, and before that I did a comic called Snow Angels with writer Jeff Lemire, and I've been in that comics grind for the last 2.5 years. I'm going to have a bit of a quiet summer. I'm doing 20 illustrations for a novella written by a friend of mine, a director friend. I did his movie poster, and they've written a little novella. Doing 20 illustrations for that. I'm doing a little bit more Witches with Scott Snyder as well. And then towards the end of the year, I'll start thinking about what the next big project will be. Maybe another Batman. I'm not sure.
We saw that you have something to do with Constantine, or you might have. Have you been consulted on? There's a show coming out, I think an HBO Max show for Constantine. Have you been consulted on that?
No. I drew well, the very first issue I drew for DC was a Hellblazer issue, and I drew like a graphic novel about 07, something like that, but no, nothing to do with it.
You can tell us here at Comicpalooza 2022 if DC's contacting you to do some kind of illustrations, but we won't see nothing. Russell.
So earlier you were saying you're doing like a lot of Batman and Superman. You have a lot of big names. Are there any like indie titles that you're working on at the moment, or what would be a favorite indie title that you have working on?
Witches with Scott Snyder. I mean, I guess you could call that an indie. We own it. We created it. It's released through Image Comics. Snow Angels as well with Jeff was our own thing. I sort of like to be able to kind of do. It's fun working on Batman and those bigger characters, but you know, the stuff you create yourself has a different place. You know, so.
Do you feel like there's a little bit more freedom with some of the doing more indie stuff, or?
Honestly, you know, maybe other people's experience has been different, but I feel like I've been very lucky. I've never had to edit myself, never had to censor myself. I feel very lucky. Even working on these big characters, like the only thing I had to change is my background.
You got the name, you do it the way you do it now, which is okay, cool.
You know, essentially, yeah. Which is the great thing about comics. The only thing I had to edit in Batman was I had a reference to him like drinking a martini, and Chris Manners was like, we can't
Publish that.
we can't suggest that Bruce Wayne drinks alcohol. I was like, really? I didn't.
I feel like I've seen that at least once or twice.
Well, maybe I think he might pretend, you know, with his little glass of water, you know, with his champagne, do the Playboy
ginger ale or something like that.
Yeah, but that was the only thing. Everything else is fine.
To your audience, would you have any aspiring message to them, if there are any up-and-coming artists?
Is that mic hooked up?
It is hooked up. You're definitely get some audience questions.
We're such a small room, like,
come on,
just
down,
ask me anything. Ask me anything.
Also, if you ask a good enough question, you'll get these P-Funk tickets. Come on, people.
I'm absolutely gutted to be missing that. George Fenton and Palmer Funkadelic are one of my favourites, and I've never seen them, and he's giving away tickets, so please go and see them so I can live vicariously through you on Wednesday night. Hey man.
Yeah, my name's Mark. I'm an indie comic publisher, and we specialize with like first-time creators. You know, so most of the folks we work with, this is their first comic that they're doing. So I guess two-part question is, when advice for like getting into your first comics, and a lot of it's creator-owned, some of them work on our stuff.
Yeah.
So advice getting into, you know, I guess establishing yourself as a comic book creator, and then from my perspective as like a publisher, like doing right by the artist. There's been a lot of like, the big theme is, you know, we have it like, our mantra is treating artists like humans, you know, which is like apparently a novel idea in some cases. But yeah, how can they do right by their career, and like how can myself as a publisher do right by their by them?
Well, thanks, because I think the way you're talking means you will be doing right by them. So thanks for that. Well, again, similar to the digital, in the digital age, for want of a better word, you know, here we are. It's never been easier to get your work out there. If you write a book, like you can just put it online, and if people dig it, they're gonna engage with it. And like I sort of hate that the idea of it being kind of content, but it's just the truth of it is you can get your stuff seen by a lot of different people now. And if it's good, I think people will respond to it. And you know, I didn't even have the internet when I was starting out, so it is very different. You know, I'm starting to feel quite old on this panel. I still feel like I'm a newbie, but like I'm clearly not.
You're always here. Everybody's always
yeah, you know, and the second part, I mean, I think, yeah, like I said, to hearing you, the way you're speaking, it's clear that you are going to be looking after the people that work for you, which is great. I've never felt particularly hard done by, really. I sort of knew what I was getting into on certain things, and they went the way that I expected them to, and I felt very lucky and looked after by the big companies as well. I'm aware that's not always the case, so it's not really for me to say that is the blanketly the way it is. Obviously, because people have had rough times, right? But yeah, I don't know. I sort of feel like things are changing a little bit. People just don't put up with that stuff as much anymore. And again, going back to the idea of the new generations coming through, and yourself included, I feel like that's what's going to change. You know, we're just not putting up with that anymore. You know, basically, and I hope companies, you know, kind of facilitate that and treat people more fairly.
So on that note, do you actually feel like the indie sphere is more on the rise now? How do you feel about like the current comic climate culture?
Yeah, again, I think it's brilliant. It's thriving. There's great stuff out there. Yeah, it's just I think it's great.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have you ever tipped with a drawing?
Have I ever what? Sorry.
Have you ever tipped with one of your drawings?
Tipped?
Yeah.
What, like in a bar or something?
Something like a restaurant where you just kind of left it like, here you go.
Here's my drawing.
Here, I mean,
Yeah.
you never know.
What the? Who's this guy? I have paid a bar tab with a drawing of Judge Dredd, yes.
Oh, see, I knew it.
How big was that tab? It was alright.
Yeah. We were down in a little show in the UK, and I feel free to touch a little one, but we were down in a little show in the UK, and there was a few artists from 2000 there, and when the guy realised, you draw for 2000 and that was it, but the bar was free. Sorry.
No, just the other question was for people who would be starting off. What would you suggest to them? Like actual something they can hold in their hand that's with lead pencils or digital?
Both is what I would say.
Diversified.
I think for kids particularly, holding a pencil on an iPad, drawing on an iPad is probably feels more natural than drawing pencil and paper. But they're both valid. You know, it's just maybe you can tell. The medium doesn't dictate the stuff you do. You know, I don't care whether it's digital. I don't care whether it's traditional. Really, you know, I personally like traditional because it surprises me in a way that I don't think digital does. You know, the ink can fall in a certain way or spatter or something, and it's kind of that feels like it's a little bit like alchemy, and I just love it. And, you know, when I surprise myself, that's great. And when I'm on Photoshop and I put on the edit button and I draw a line that's not right, edit it, and I don't know, it's a different kind of experience. So, but I think kids coming up, or anyone starting out, you know, maybe there's no substitute for pencil and paper, but at the end of the day, I don't think it matters really.
I think that answers the last question, which is pen or pencil?
Both. All of it.
So, sorry, I got more questions myself. So earlier you were saying Superman was a little bit more difficult for you. Is there a particular project that kind of like was difficult for you to the extent it still gives you nightmares today? And like, how did you overcome that? How did you end up getting through it?
Yeah, well, it's not so much that it's difficult. It's that I realised that kind of it's, you know, my style, whatever it is, isn't as suited to that type of character. Like Superman is very clean, strong, and crisp. You know, yeah, which is what he should be. And my stuff tends to be a bit dirty and dark, and sort of like I use a lot of black, right? And but I've been asked to draw Superman a few times, and you know, a lot of times I feel like I didn't get him right, but I've done about 3 covers in the last kind of 5 years or so, where it's like, okay, if I'm going to do this guy, I want to try and get it right, and I'm more proud of those. But they took me a while to hone them and get them right. You know, like a Batman cover, I can do that very, very easily. Yeah. But to answer your question, I guess so. Years ago, I was offered a run on one of the Avengers covers, Marvel Avengers. And at the time, I'd done some stuff, but I was quite flattered to be offered the Avengers cover. I was like, yeah, I'll do the Avengers, incredible. And I immediately realised that this was a really hard thing to do. 6 characters all gleaming, Iron Man and Captain America and Black Panther, and you know, great characters. But you know, to answer your question again, like the way I handled it is I think I did issue 5 or 6, and I was meant to do the whole run, and I just politely said to my editor, you know what, I'm not sure that I'm the right fit for this, because I wasn't enjoying doing them. I don't think the covers are very good, to be honest. I think there's one I quite liked, but you know, I'm far more interested in like being honest about that stuff and getting it right and understanding your strengths, you know. And it doesn't mean that you know, just because I'm on Suit to Avengers, it doesn't mean that I'm any less. You know what I mean? It's like I just realised that this is not my bag, and so I've just politely stepped away from it. You know? So it doesn't give me nightmares because I just politely stepped away instead of continuing to sort of like torture myself trying to do these guys.
So, as much as it's on the paper, it's like off the paper, do the teams that you work with when building a comic book, how does that like affect the process itself? Does it make it more stressful? Are you able to get something through something a little bit easier? Or is it even, do you guys even like work together like that close?
Do you mean teams as in like the writer or the editor? Or?
Writer, editor, pencil, word lettering, like the whole shebang. Like how much do you guys like actually meet up to like work on something? Like how does that fit?
Yeah, well, yeah, no, it does, yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking the thing I've just done was just really all me, so I only have meetings with myself in my own head. Yeah, no, I've been very lucky. I'm friends with all the writers that I work with. I've done a lot with Scott Snyder, and we talk on the phone a lot. He's very open and always asks for suggestions, but I don't really need to give them because he's such a great writer. A really good editor is priceless, really. I was spoiled when I first joined DC Vertigo. I had Will Dennis, who is still a friend. He went on to write my art book. He's still editing stuff that I'm doing now. And I had him for a few years, and then I went to the DCU, and I was surprised by the different way that they edited books. So I don't know. I feel like a good creative team should be like a little gang. You know, you support each other, and you've got each other's backs, and you help where it helps needed, and pull away and let them be when that's appropriate too. You know, so. You know, it's like a little band, I guess. You know, when the dynamics are good, it's really good.
That's great. Right.
We had a question from the audience. Question.
A couple. Race. Wrestle up.
That's very high, isn't it? You can pull it down. There you go.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Julian.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm enjoying this. So first I wanted to say I haven't read The Losers yet, but I did watch the movie. I loved it. I've watched it like a bunch of times. It's like the perfect blend of like comedy and action. And then my question is, I'm kind of getting back into like trying to draw a I mean, not more seriously, but like maybe get back into like drawing comics. I mean, I wasn't professional, but when I was younger, I was able to actually like finish, like have a story and then finish drawing it. And now I'm like, I can have a story, but then I'm like, it doesn't look good though. When you're drawing, do you use the traditional like line, you know, the thing like where there's a circle?
Yeah.
And you draw the line?
Well, like constructing a drawing?
Yeah.
You mean like when you draw a circle, the lines for the way the eyes are going to go and stuff?
Yeah, have you ever used that technique? Like when you first started, or?
Honestly, not really, but for some things that's really useful because it gives you a really decent foundation. You know, my method is that I sort of try and see it in my mind's eye and then draw it on the page rather than letting. I sort of know what you're saying, but I find sometimes when you do that, it can be a little bit lifeless because you're letting what's in front of you dictate what you're drawing. You're thinking, oh, the eyes are supposed to be there. And what works for me is I visualize how I want it to look in my head, and then I try and draw what's in my head. You know, and it doesn't always work. You know, and it's never quite what I see in my head, but you know that's my goal. But I'd say if you're starting out again and you know learning, that's a really useful kind of approach because it does teach you basics. You know, you use like cylinders for arms, and square bit of torso, and it just kind of helps you figure out. Because a lot of it is about being able to sort of understand all this stuff around it: bodies, tables, cars, you know, hands. They're a nightmare to do. You know, and if you can break it down in your mind, you know, about what's going on there in the sections that you have in your body, then that does help you figure out how to draw for sure. But I think there comes a point where that knowledge is sort of in there. You know, learn about anatomy, you know, do life drawing, learn all that stuff, and then I find then when you do draw, it's kind of that's already there. So I just try and be a little bit more direct about it rather than constructing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for the question.
It's like a free pair of George Clinton tickets.
Want to see Colin Funkadelic? Someone's got to go see them because I can't go see them. Look, they're right there.
There you go. This coming was a House of Blues.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Spider-Man, what's up?
Yeah,
Hey man.
I may be dressed as Spider-Man, but I'm more of a DC guy. This was just
So is this guy. Tell my way of talking.
so. I know artists typically put Easter eggs
Mm-hmm.
in any of the panels and artwork that they do. Is there a favorite Easter egg of yours that you have that you put in there and kind of makes you laugh every now and then? Like, oh, nobody's really caught that yet.
I have done a few actually. There's one really that I realised now I really shouldn't have done, which was I was drawing a story for 2008. It was a story called Lenny Zero, which is a character set in Judge Dred's world that Andy Diggle writes with the Losers. I did that with him, and on the last page was a shot of the city that had billboards, and I put billboards for the Losers in the artwork. Shouldn't really have done that for the DC property in 2008, but no one noticed. You know, I just had like a shot of Aisha, the character, like on a billboard. I've done it a few times, and it's always fun just to kind of
Perfect. Then I have a follow-up question. So
Yeah,
aside from the martini glass, what other struggles have you had with?
Sorry,
aside from the martini glass,
Mhm.
with DC, what other struggles have you had with, like, you put something in and you were surprised that you had to take it out?
None.
No? Just a martini of all things?
Yeah, and that was just a bit of dialogue, you know. Again, that's what I answer your like. Maybe I've just been lucky, but I felt like I've always been able to do my own thing. No one really questions it. People seem to like it, hopefully, and I've never had any problems in that. I've always felt looked after, you know. So, again, to me, that's the great thing about comics. I think you might imagine you have to sort of like, and maybe for some characters you do, but you know, sort of stick it within certain limitations. But that's not been my experience, really. You know, I think if you're doing a Batman book, you kind of know what a Batman book is. You know, I'm not going to have him. Well, I'm not going to say what going to happen, but like, you know what I mean. Like you kind of know what these books are, but still, I've never had any pushback, really. You know, just the odd suggestion. You know, on covers. You know, early on, Will Dennis Mads would offer great suggestions about composition and maybe push that bit and focus on this a bit, you know, early on. But that was just to help. You know, that wasn't really any kind of like censoring or anything like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, asking better questions than us.
How's it going, Jock?
Good, how are you?
Richard here. I'm just curious,
Mhm.
mainly when you do a commission for a poster, are you pro time release or kind of pro a set limited?
Okay, if anyone doesn't know, the world of posters, I work for a company I do a lot of posters for Mondo. We're a collectible pop culture company, for want of a better word, and they make beautiful screen printed posters, and they're very limited. They only publish 250 copies. You can also put them on sale for 48 hours. This is very boring, I'm sorry, but they can also put them on sale for like 48 hours, and then whoever buys one, that's what the product is, right? Does that make sense to everyone? Right. So he's asking which one do I prefer, and maybe you can tell from all the ways that I've answered before, both's fine.
Oh, okay.
There's obviously something cool about time edition because it means anyone that wants the poster can get it.
For example, that was one of the few times I was able to get, I think I mentioned yesterday, your Star Wars in the
Yes,
shoot
yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm an old guy. I still run AOL, so I can't compete
Yeah.
on the
Yeah,
internet stuff.
it is pretty crazy. Like the posters are so limited, they sell out in like
Yeah.
0.5 of a second, so it is very hard to get them.
But it is good. So, that's a good deal. I always appreciated that, So now I try to do a better job following and with Mondo doing the steelbook line, I think that's why I appreciate it because
Sorry.
that's what I was saying. Like Mondo, they started doing their steelbook line,
Steelbooks, yeah.
and that's where I got to appreciate it because now I was able to appreciate your Pencil Labyrinth and the Dread
Thank
and
you.
the Thing, and
Yeah.
I think they did Ex Machina, and such. And so I was like, okay, at least that's another avenue to enjoy your artwork. So
Thank you.
if y'all do ever collaborate, I wouldn't mind seeing Apocalypse Now.
I've done a poster for Comics Now.
That's what I was saying. I would like to see that now on the steelbook.
That was a private commission.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's not licensed, so it can be used for anything.
Good deal,
unfortunately.
good deal. All
But
right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Hey.
Here. This is just a general question I've always wondered about your art. Like you've drawn a lot of DC and Marvel and stuff like that. Is there ever like a character that you haven't drawn yet that you'd love to get to around one of these days?
No, I've been very lucky. I've ticked all my boxes really. When I was growing up, Judge Dredd was my favourite character. That was my very first work. Batman was terrific. The only thing was not in comics, but when I heard they were making the new Star Wars movies, I must admit I thought I'd quite like to have got the call to do some concept work for this new Star Wars movie. But then I did work on The Last Jedi. I did 9 months of costume concept design. So even that, I kind of tick that box.
Because personally, I've always thought you'd be great for a Swamp Thing.
I've done an issue of something.
Oh,
yeah,
what was
yeah,
that?
very early on. It's not reprinted anywhere.
Oh,
yeah, it's
no wonder I haven't
in
seen it.
2005 maybe I did one issue. Yeah.
I don't know why they haven't brought you back. I feel like your art would work great for that character.
Thank you. Yeah. No, you never know. Yeah.
Well, one day.
Thanks.
No
Kind
problem.
of piggybacking off of that, actually, is there anybody that you want to collaborate with that you haven't collaborated with yet?
So, I mean, you
take all your boxes.
I feel like this is it's not very interesting because unfortunately I've worked with amazing people that I count myself lucky to have done, and I've even now written for myself. So it's kind of I don't know what to say. Really. I mean, all right, maybe I'd still kind of like to get a script from Alan Moore and draw that.
Oh yeah.
I bet Snyder was cool too. Just want to put that.
Yes, Scott's amazing. Yeah, exactly.
Hi, when you're creating something from scratch,
Mhm.
for yourself perhaps, what's your thought process? What are your considerations, and are there elements that you have to include?
But I have elements that I.
Elements that you must include?
That's a really sort of expansive question, really. It's hard to put. I think because I've been doing so long, I draw every single day. Like I said earlier, it feels more instinctive now. I don't really. I find, in fact, what you asked the question earlier, if I do overthink it, I think it affects the work because you're trying to make it something that it maybe shouldn't be. Your mind gets in the way, Or maybe a better way, a more reliable answer, and that would be maybe if you're starting out and you first start getting professional work and you get a call to be on an Avengers book, it's very easy for your mind to go, what is the Avengers supposed to look like, and should I bend what I do to make it look more like that? Right? That's a really standard sort of thing that happens in my experience to a lot of people in the industry. It's easy to sort of to you know, to speak to the last point you made, it's easy to think that you have to hit certain beats for certain characters, and you kind of do actually for certain beats and certain characters. But as maybe you can tell, I've just tried to follow my own way of doing things, and the projects and characters and stories films that I've been lucky enough to work on. I've not really had to overthink. And it's certainly got to the point now where certainly in comics, they know what I can do, they know what I do and what that kind of thing is. I just it's a very, very vague answer. I wish I had a better answer for you. It's really vague, isn't it?
What is your own project?
Yeah. But even that, I just try and be instinctive about it and not overthink it too much. Because arts is like I play music as well. I play the drums, and you play the drums best by not thinking about it, by just sort of feeling your way through. And art's very well, it's very similar, but I want it to be that way for myself as well. So when I sit down, and it's just more about the feeling of what I'm doing, because that's what makes it very drawing. Generally, that's what people respond to when there's a purity or a sort of honesty. I don't want to get too pretentious, but it's kind of true. It's like when you do it, like I know when I'm feeling it, and I know that the drawing is good, and I know people go, "Oh, that's good." There's sort of something. It's like I can't really put it into words really. So quite what that is. So I'm sorry that doesn't really answer your question, but thanks.
How do you know when a piece is done? When you need to stop.
Was it Picasso? He said, "Art is never finished; it's just left in really interesting places."
True.
Well, Jock, we want to thank you so much for coming out and sharing your thoughts with the audience here. But before we go, we have like a little 10-question rapid-fire question we'd love to ask all our
Don't
artists.
think about it.
Russell, go for it.
All right, so you might have some friends within the companies and stuff, but put your bias aside. Who's your favorite comic book publisher? You got to pick one.
2008.
Okay.
Who is your favorite hero and villain?
Judge Dredd, Judge Death.
Which superpower would you like to have?
Fly.
Would you be with that power? Would you be a hero or a villain?
Anti-hero.
Do you have another favorite illustrator?
No. I love lots of very different reasons.
Who is your favorite writer?
I love lots of different writers for lots of different reasons. Sorry, guys. I'm not very into entertaining podcasts.
Is there anything about comic culture right now that you dislike?
No.
Easygoing guy.
Is there one thing that you would love to have in your collection, if you have a collection?
Yes, I was. Okay, this isn't a rapid fire question to answer. Sorry. Frank Miller was Dark Knight Returns was a favourite when I was young, and I've since met Frank, and I did a cover for Dark Knight 3, which hangs in his front room. And when I first met him, I went up to his apartment and I saw my artwork hanging in his front room, and he got that off of someone that bought it from me. But he said to my manager guy, if he'd got it from me, he would have swapped a page of Dark Knight for my cover, and I wish I had that.
Nice, very nice.
What other profession would you like to pursue?
Music.
Play drums, all types of keys, everything?
Yeah. What I've had to do with drums, when I was starting out, I was trying to do both professionally. Basically, I was giving both equal, and in fact, they both worked out at the same time. And I was hired to play in a band, and I ended up having to paint Judge Dredd pages on a tour bus around Europe, which I do not recommend, by the way. But then the singer left, and that band fell apart, and
Okay.
And lastly, if you had a chance to spend a week in a fictional world, where would it be?
in a what world?
In a fictional world.
A fictional world. A week in a fictional world.
Yes, sir.
Legacy one.
Legacy.
Judge
Nice.
Dredd. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jock, and thank you so much for having us, or letting us have you on Comic Cave Podcast. Russ, take us out.
Yeah, guys, also stick around. We have a few other panels coming up after this with Haley Brown, and then we also have how to make a comic, how to publish a comic coming up later on. With lesser known comics, you guys can talk to Mark back over there. Raise your hand, Mark. And
free stuff.
Yeah.
Also,
And free stuff. We got some
in the
giveaways
back,
coming
Lesser Known
up.
Comics free swag back there. When you exit, you can get some comics and some free swag from Lesser Known Comics. Thank you guys so much. Once again, my name is Chris, along with my head of life, Chris.
Russ.
And also,
Thanks. Jock.
until next time, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.